you break metal, then that's bigger problems like this. But yeah. All right. So guys, if you want, we'll take a quick run through. Face that way. So, observation, we're looking for gross asymmetries, right?
I see one.
So, looking at his hips, everything looks pretty in a line. I'm not too concerned there. If I'm looking at his knees, that looks pretty symmetrical too. As well as looking from the side, I can see straight across. I can't see his left leg unless I'm favoring one side or the other, so everything's in line there. If I look from the front, his knees face out a little bit, but nothing crazy. And if anything, his tibia has a little bit more of a, the knee has a little bit more of a slope, but nothing special.
The right calf isn't as strong.
His calf's not as strong? I didn't check that yet.
I'm just looking.
It's muscle both
Oh,
lines.
muscle bone.
Who's the right ones?
Oh, I guess you're
Little
right.
bit
Yeah,
more
you
of a
didn't.
line here.
Yeah, okay, fine. You didn't check
And
it.
there. I didn't check yet.
I get it.
Where was your surgery on, Sam?
That was the foot.
He has a little bit of a bunion on his right foot, flat feet wise. I don't see any extra toes. And from the side, I don't see, I could see a arch. I can't see that his navicular is not on the floor. And then same from over here. So the only thing observation-wise that I see is I would have already known about his surgery from his history, but I would know that he has a bunion. His knees are facing slightly out. He doesn't have flat feet, and that's basically it. Anybody see, from Achilles wise, what I was saying before? This looks relatively straight. The right looks actually, I would say, a little puffy.
A what? Is it pump bump?
Is it purple? What?
No, he's talking about the bump.
Oh, the bump?
What is that? A pump bump?
When it gets palpation, yeah, okay.
Like a bum bum?
Sam, what's it called?
Happens to fly. So the bump is heart. So this isn't swelling, which means there's something there. I would be not concerned, but I would just take note of a little bit of swelling along here. So between this little bony deformity, which is called Haglund's deformity, it could certainly get a lot more severe, plus a little swelling. I would question, why is the Achilles region taking a little bit more stress? Is it bunion related? Is it not? Is it because he's compensating because he has some surgery that I didn't ask him about over here? I don't know. All I can observe is Achilles looks pretty straight. This looks a little swollen. This looks like a little deformity. This looks like a little bunion, and he has some surgery here, and his knees are a little turned down. Check, check, check. Moving on. Good? So that's what we get. I have no clue if that has anything to do with his problem. All I know is that's what I see. Those are the asymmetries that I see. What are you here for again? Your shoulder? All right, this has nothing to do with the problem, so it's all good. So, any questions on any of the stuff we went over here? Good. Take a seat with your feet facing them. I had him stand first for a very important reason. It was to get your attention, but you could always start in non-weight bearing as well. And you could look now at the bottom of his feet to see.
Nick is the worst in terms of professionalism points, man.
He knows how to make people feel good about themselves.
That is correct.
Usually that's because people compensate when they say it like that.
Oh.
Me? Oh, I was like, what?
She's like, I'm trying to help you out.
I know.
Oh, no, that was not sticking up to you. That was making fun of you.
It's not making fun. It's called self-awareness.
Yeah, it's self-awareness. I can rate myself, all right?
So, we look for just asymmetrical blisters, atrophy, and calluses to see. The most common ones are over here would be a callus because we land too much with a rigid lever on a supinated foot. And then the next one would be here, and that's because we excessively cave in and then push off of this spot.
You're saying that's why the rubbing.
You
Look at the shoe.
You'd still feel
you'd
it,
still
like,
look at their shoe,
when you
yeah.
have callus, I feel like you still feel people who have good calluses.
Where you go, did you get a pedicure yesterday? Yeah, I have to get them all the time because I'm always calloused in these two spots. Has to get the cheese grater out.
You're not allowed to use it at Las Vegas.
I mean, you're not supposed to.
And then you look, compare bilaterally. So, good on observation? So then we go into palpation. So lay on, you could do this in sitting, but we're gonna do this in prone, so go on your stomach. So for palpation, what's the point of palpation?
Tenderness, any kind of, to make sure
Tenderness.
everything's there.
So what diagnosis is it? If it reproduces pain?
Muscular.
Pathoanatomical. So let's just go quick here. So we wanna rule stuff in, good, good, good.
Oh shit. Is it?
Okay. Local observation. Do we have a swollen ankle? Is it warm? Did I hurt myself yesterday or 6 weeks ago? Fat pad atrophy from excessive compression, callus blisters, fat pads, we talked about all that. Redness, swelling gives you acuity. Figure 8. I didn't bring my tape measure, but if someone has it, we'll go over it. All it is you go from malleolus to malleolus, underneath the navicular, over to the base of the fifth, and back to its originating starting point. If you have more than a 9.3 millimeter difference, it shows that you have swelling in the ankle. But we saw he had swelling in the ankle without a tape measure, so we need this?
Not really.
Of course we do, it's an objective measure, that's great for goals.
Reduce swelling.
Just say,
And I
reduce
can put a
swelling,
number
that's
on there, by a certain
If
number.
I say on documentation, I'm gonna reduce his swelling so he could do stuff, they're just taking my word for it. Insurance companies aren't gonna take my word for it, they're gonna take the money back. So you need to have an objective measure to say, if there's swelling, there is 1 inch more swelling on his right compared to his left. So when I find a tape measure, we'll go over it, but for now, you're off the hook. Okay.
Swelling to
You have
your
one?
short
All right,
term
cool,
goal.
we'll get it in a second. Lateral knee position, we went over that quick. Alden, we talked about hyperextension or Recker bottom, flexion of the knees. You expect that a little bit more, I think, with the arthritic population. From the front, you're looking at bow leg, a knock knee, so that's your varus and valgus. This was a conversation between me and Alden, but we talked about anteversion and retroversion at the hips, followed by tibial compensations, because if you're externally rotated, you're not gonna walk like the duck. Tibias are gonna internally rotate so that you're straight. So that's how you can look at that. And arches. We discussed the navicular tubercle is gonna be sort of in line with the first met head and the medial malleolus. So what's the most helpful is you start in non-weight bearing, this looks great, it's perfectly in line. Now you stand up and all of a sudden this bone goes down here. That's flat foot. So at that point though, you have to determine, is it functional flat foot? So someone who is anatomically flat foot should look like this, whether they're weight bearing or non-weight bearing. But if they go from high or normal and you stand them up and all of a sudden it goes to this, now you have to worry about a functional flat foot. Is this just a control problem? Does this contribute to their presentation, their complaint? Too many toes. If you have more than 2 showing, that's one example. You're looking at the rear foot, so the Achilles should look like a straight line, but if you see a little bit of a bow, that's something you have to think of. This person who has flat feet, that's your C curvature, and you can see that's more prominent on the inside. Rear foot varus is the exact opposite of rear foot valgus. That's when the high arch population, where the ankle turns the other way into a more supinated position. So that would be like this. And if this is excessively caving in, then we are elongating these posterior tib tendons, which supports our medial longitudinal arch of the navicular tubercle. So that just gives you a reason as to why this tendon is so important. And the plantar fascia as well, and the intrinsics of the foot, they're the ones that create your bowstringing. With the Achilles, if you have a little bit of a bubble, you have to be concerned over, is it painful? Does it move? So you can dorsiflex and plantar flex the foot and see if that bubble moves. So that can give you an idea of a tenosynovitis, the inflammation of the sheath, versus an osis, just a breakdown of the tendon. So things to think about there. So we observed all this. Good. So this was the weight bearing, their willingness to do it, as well as their balance. So if you're checking out just their static positioning, there's no reason why you can't just look at balance on one leg real quick. You're allowed to do that. So, stages of healing, friction sites, structural versus functional flat foot, we talked about that. Hind foot varus, that's when this is supinated too much. Remember, if we're in an inverted or supinated position, that's going to increase ground reaction forces. Ground reaction forces is that. We don't like that because our bones take a lot of stress or shock from it. So those are our stiff people. We have increased stability, decreased mobility. What type of injuries, PA, diagnosis do you worry about in this population? Fractures is possible. What kind of fractures? Stress fractures. Hind foot valgus, aka flat feet, but we were just talking about the hind foot at this point, so the calcaneus. Now we're in a more mobile standpoint. There's decreased stability. What type of population are we worried about? Instability is possible.
Athletes?
So what injuries?
Yeah,
So
we
you
think
said
it's
that
right.
you're worried about
Yeah.
bone here, right?
Yeah, we think it's the ankle sprain. Chronic ankle sprain.
Ligament, subluxations of this, that's a yes, that's tough to do, but yes. So if what is bony structures, what's the other one? Non-bony structures. Stress, fractures, stress fractures, increased stresses, right? So this is now our dynamic movers, the ones that have a hard time stabilizing, so they get extra friction and shearing. So if you had to pick a special test, we have two choices. We have compression and we have shearing. Which one do you think would hurt for this group? Compression. What do you think would hurt this group?
Shearing.
Do you think you would have to get improved range of motion on this person or improved stability?
Motion. Stability.
Okay. So do you think a biomechanical correction, these are all just generic, but biomechanical correction, do you think would help here or here?
First one.
What would help here?
Stabilization.
Okay. That's why it's generic, because you could argue either or for different reasons, but it gives you an idea. Range of motion, because they're stiff, they're getting increased shock. The other, they're not controlling their foot, so things are just going like this in friction. You guys learned that the hip can affect the knee, can affect the ankle, right?
Yes.
So why can't the foot affect the knee, affect the hip? Okay. Chicken or the egg. Same thing. Hips, foot supination, ground reaction forces can reach the hip. When I fractured my back, that's basically what happened. Very stiff. Stiff leg to the ground. Excessive ground reaction forces went up the leg, and then went up to the knee, then went up to the hip. Then I was like this. So what's the last place for it to go? My back. So that's how I fractured my back. From hitting my foot on the ground. Whereas maybe if I was super mobile, maybe the went up my leg, then it went to my knee. What happens if I'm very mobile and I hit and stresses go up to my knee? Ligament tear. Anybody ski? This is more for skiers than snowboarders. You're going down the slopes. You catch your foot, aka your on a lip. You're slightly bent. Your momentum's going forward. Lip takes your leg out, and now this stress goes forward. That's how we have ligament tears. So once again, we're thinking bony problems, stiff,
She had a full on.
open pack position laxities, ligament injuries, and muscle injuries. Good. Okay.
Still better than
Systems.
someone.
Do a good exam.
Yeah, send it.
Movement problems with balance, you have to look at where the deviations are. Remember when I did this? Is that an ankle problem?
No.
That's somewhere else. Whereas I can be like this, and then you could see my foot caving like crazy. That could be coming from the ankle. So you have to figure out where is the motion coming from. This is a little bit before you, what you guys know, but what systems are involved for balance? The vestibular system is the important one. So good, visual. Proprioceptive, somatosensory, yep. And vestibular, so ear, eyes, and tactile sense. Weight bearing is just willingness to move. The only thing we care about is this: what can I not do? That's the only thing you need to worry about. Otherwise, you can do anything.
Like in protocol, you're saying, is that precautions?
That's right. Yeah, precautions. For surgical precautions is all you need to know.
Okay.
It's like when your parents yell at you, but you never told me I couldn't do that. You ever say that to your parents? Happens in class all the time. But you didn't tell me we couldn't do that. Where does the Achilles attach? So that's insertional if you have a problem down there. If you have that ball of swelling in the middle, 2 to 4 centimeters above the calcaneus, that's mid-portion. And so breakdown of the tendon, inflammation of the tendon sheath. Doesn't have to mean anything to you other than what we talked about before, that ball of swelling and the location. Yeah. You said you want to reproduce pain, so all we have to do is palpate some stuff. So what were we worried about before?
This field of